This week, Paul and I interview Rey Bango, security advocate at Microsoft. In the news, another server security lapse at NASA exposed staff and project data. Google wins a US approval patent, or rather, US approval, not a patent, for a new radar-based motion sensor. And GitHub now gives free users unlimited private repositories. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies, protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week. Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences, demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 46, our 47th episode of Application Security Weekly. And of course, I am your host, Keith Hoodlet, excited to be joined once again by my esteemed co-host, Paul Asadorian.
Hey, thanks, Keith. I just want to say that this episode, at least my lunch, was brought to you by ramen noodles. So for those that think I might live a lavish lifestyle, this was, in fact, my lunch that I just finished eating.
Very nice. You know, in fact, when I was flying over to Melbourne last year, we had to go Cathay Pacific over to Hong Kong, and then from there down to Melbourne. They served cup of noodles is one of the meals. It was actually quite good.
Right.
So
it's awesome stuff. Just don't put the styrofoam in the microwave.
Yeah, don't do that. It's a bad idea.
Johnny Blaze has made that mistake when he watched me pour hot water. He's like, why don't you just put it in the microwave? I'm like, it says right on the package not to do that. Like, bad things will happen. He's like, dude, I've been doing that my whole life. I'm like, you need to RTFM, my friend. And then we read, and it causes like some hormonal imbalance. So, you know, if Johnny's voice sounds a little high or he's rubbing his chest or something, you know what happened. Just throwing that out there.
Got it. Duly noted. Duly noted. Before we jump into our interview for today, by the way, we do have a couple of announcements. So speaking of things that you should not microwave, the RSA Conference 2019 is the place to be for the latest in cybersecurity data, innovation, and thought leadership. From March 4th to the 8th in San Francisco, it will come alive with cybersecurity's brightest minds as they gather together to discuss the industry's newest developments. Go to rsaconference.com/securityweekly-US19. That's US19er to register now using the discount code 5U9ERSWFD. That's 5 Urban Niner Sierra Whiskey Foxtrot Delta.
You know, it's Utah. I was corrected on the show. It's Utah.
This is the second week that I've done that in a row. One of these days I will learn it. 5 Utah Niner Sierra Whiskey Foxtrot Delta to receive $100 off a full.
Well done.
So with that, jumping in, Rey is a security advocate at Microsoft, focused on helping the community build secure systems and being a voice for researchers within Microsoft. After a long career in software development, he developed a strong interest in cybersecurity 2 years ago and worked feverishly to transition into this new community. Rey Bango, welcome to the show, my friend.
Wow, you read that perfectly. You got good reading skills.
That's why we keep him around. You know, someone's got to be able to read around here.
You know, the things that I'm really good at reading is bios and contracts. What can I say?
There you go. Bios and contracts. All right. So I'll keep that in mind for the next contract I have to sign. Keith is good.
Duly noted. Duly noted. I do charge a fee, but we won't go into it on the show.
Nominal fees.
So, Rey, I've got to ask, and I mean, I know because we've talked about this a little bit ever since you knew that the transition was going to happen. But for our listeners, what is a security advocate? And how do I get that job?
Oh, I don't know how you're going to get the job. So I've been a developer advocate for a very long time. And when I was a developer advocate, the role was to work with the web developer community to understand the things that were important to them, give them a voice into Microsoft, and make sure that we were considering their needs when we're building products, when we're building services, that we're helping them be successful in some way. And so I'm going to say about 2 years ago, when I first started exploring information security, there was a lot of different tracks that you can take when you're going into the information security world. And one of the things I thought was security advocacy would be a really good thing to think about. And so, sorry about that. My daughter just decided to walk in.
It happens.
So I feel like the father on the BBC right now when the daughter was coming in and doing a dance. So it's kind of funny.
Yes.
Yeah. So I started thinking about security advocacy, and I was like, wow, okay, we need somebody who can go into the community and work with real world practitioners, whether you're a security researcher, a pen tester, a bug hunter, and spend time having conversations with the community to figure out what's important to them, what is it that makes them tick, and how do we make sure at Microsoft, for example, that we're meeting those needs, whether it's making sure that our security products are available to them in some fashion, or maybe that we're missing some feedback channel that will help us secure our customers. And so that's kind of the rationale behind it. That's the whole premise of this, going out there and making sure that I'm an advocate for the community, that I can speak with the community, that I give them that feedback channel back into the company, and that we allow them to have a voice.
So when it comes to transitioning from that kind of DevRel into AppSec space, what were, some of the things that you started to focus on as you were making that transition? Because again, a couple of years ago, I know that we met, at least a year ago, if not longer, Ray. And I think it was Black Hat, was it last year or 2 years ago at this point? I can't even recall, but
2 years ago.
You started, you started going down the path of, really looking into security and starting to dive deeper into it. And I mean, I can just imagine for anyone coming out of the development space looking at security today, there's just so much out there. What ultimately kind of led you to where you are today, but also what were some of the things you explored in that journey?
Sure, that's a great question. So the thing for me, and I've told this story a couple times, is that when WannaCry hit, that was a big turning point for me. I saw it, and I saw people being turned away from the NHS, the UK health system, in terms of their treatment for cancer, just being turned away from the hospital and the doctors because the
Uh-oh. I hope it's not our bandwidth.
Yeah, it's I think it's Ray. It's not us.
If I can still hear and see you, Keith. Yeah.
Yeah, it said my internet connection was unstable.
Well, I thought it was us because I made changes to the firewall on Friday, which you're never supposed to make changes on Friday, but
there you go.
Yeah, it's read-only Fridays, Paul. Read-only Fridays.
Yep.
Anyway, Ray, sorry.
Continue.
Carry on.
All right. So when WannaCry hit, it was a big deal, and I felt like it was what if it was my family? What if it was my children that couldn't get the medical attention? And I wanted to start exploring ways that I can help. And initially, it was in the form of kind of like a hobbyist. I wanted to see what opportunities there were to contribute back to securing systems, even if it was just volunteering my time. And so I think the natural way for me to do it was to go and look at AppSec because of my background. But the more I dug into it, the more I really wanted to explore other options within security. Security is such a big field. And the more I dug into it, the more I wanted to explore pen testing, the more I wanted to understand network security, open source intelligence, and all these different facets of the security landscape. I didn't want to just kind of go with AppSec, and I think a lot of people were kind of directing me in that way because they felt it was a natural route for me to get into security, and I totally understand it. I just didn't want to, pigeonhole myself. I kind of equated to when you're typecast in Hollywood, and they only put you in films that you've kind of done over a period of time. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to explore multiple facets of security, so that way I can really dial into the area that I liked the most. And so DEF CON and Black Hat were my big eye-opening experiences in terms of security, because I remember that when I went to DEF CON, I was scared. I really was intimidated by all the reputation it had, where you were going to get hacked and people were going to do malicious things to you and all that stuff. And when I reached out to a bunch of folks on Twitter, all I got was support. People really wanted me to be a part of the community, and they were there to embrace me and support me and help me and make sure that I had a really good experience at the events. And that was a big turning point for me. So I would say that going into DEF CON and going into Black Hat and just seeing the events and really understanding how the community works and the ebbs and flows and the things you should do and the things you shouldn't do was a really big benefit to me. And I would say that anybody who wants to get into security should explore that avenue. Go to the big events and try to understand how the community works. Don't go in there trying to establish anything. Just go in there and try to just listen, sit down and kind of look at everything that's going on and take it all in and enjoy it.
So I can imagine that, especially given your experience of working with developers, you have a pretty unique view as to how security can work with the developer community. But before we get into kind of that element of it, in your mind, what is the importance of building or developing those relationships with people outside of kind of the security ecosystem, for lack of a better term?
Well, I think you need to build the relationships on both sides of the fence. It's critically important because there's the way that developers think is at many times at odds with the concerns that security professionals think about. So obviously security professionals want to provide the most reasonable amount of security to protect their assets. Makes total sense. And that's what everybody wants to do in the security field. They just want to secure systems, and I totally understand it. But you have software developers that are also kind of driven by the desire to build systems that delight the end user, will obviously in some cases monetize their systems, and they want to be able to maximize the exposure that the systems can offer and the features that they can offer. And sometimes that comes at odds with the security field, where the security field wants to lock in things a little bit more, but there's a business rationale for loosening the reins a little bit. And that's where the conflicts seem to come in. How much rope do you give software developers so that they can do what they need to do and provide the best possible user experiences and the most feature-rich applications, while also making sure that you don't open up the floodgates to somebody who wants to do something malicious? So it is a balancing act. The other thing that I do know is that I think a lot of developers don't go in with a security mindset. It's just not taught. When I was in college, security wasn't taught. As I grew into the software development field, security still wasn't taught. It was always the job of an sysadmin to go and secure systems. And then as you got a little bit more, you progress a little bit more, you start learning that, hey, yeah, maybe I should sanitize inputs or be careful with my REST APIs and how I'm going to handle that, or how am I going to expose it. But I think there has to be a lot more coordination between the software developers and the security folks, whether it's DevSecOps or just the IT admins that are trying to lock down the systems. There has to be more coordination so that you can find that right balance. And if the two were a little bit more open to talking, and on one end you have the developers who should understand a little bit more about the security implications of the things they do, whether it's reading the OWASP top 10 or taking a course. And then you have the security folks who should probably understand a little bit more about the business requirements and the needs for flexibility and how software actually works. I think if that happened, then you'd have kind of like almost like this happy kumbaya moment where everybody gets along and builds a really compelling system.
Do we get to hold hands and sing around the campfire?
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Did I ever tell you that you're my hero, Paul? You're everything I would like to be, and I would fly higher than any eagle, Paul, if you were the wind beneath my wings.
It's an inside joke. So I agree, Ray, that both developers and security folk need to collaborate better, communicate better. I think one of the things, I mean, a lot of the obvious things aside, right? But one of the things that I think about today is how fast developer technology and security technology and security vulnerabilities are moving, which I think makes it even more important. How do we stay in communication as both of our respective worlds are just moving at 800 miles an hour?
That's a hard question to answer. I like the concept of DevSecOps, where you have this blend of people who truly understand the developer story and have a firm understanding of how the operations side works. That seems to be a nice happy medium. So people like Tanya Janka, who's my one of my colleagues at Microsoft, she epitomizes that, a person who understands both sides of the field and can really go ahead and give solid feedback to companies that want to provide their developers with a secure landscape, and also ensure that their IT admins can sleep well at night. So it's a hard thing to kind of come to a central conclusion. But I think that maybe having good stakeholders on both sides of the fence that can communicate with each other and have either weekly stand-ups or monthly stand-ups, something that the two understand what the priorities of each other's are, and can drive on that. I think that's one of the things that can be done to minimize some of the pain points.
And an additional question, I think that that we're starting to see play more and more of a role in security and in development, quite frankly, is the cloud. And I'm curious to know, in your opinion, Ray, how much cloud today, especially Microsoft Azure, has done some really incredible work in this space, as well as Azure Sphere. When we spoke with Galen Hunt last year on that as well, in terms of some of the things that Microsoft is doing in IoT. How much do you think that the cloud changes the game for everyone? From both a security standpoint, as well as for the developers that are trying to, iterate faster, but also have the ability to rebuild when something might be vulnerable.
Right, and I think the cloud offers a sense of stability for a lot of folks who don't want to scaffold up their own infrastructure. So it does make it easy for things like deployment and management of infrastructure, because basically you're outsourcing some of that to the infrastructure side, to a cloud provider, whether it's Azure or GCP or AWS. So I think that's really good in that sense. It also ensures that the bigger companies like Microsoft will spend time ensuring that their infrastructure is secure. It doesn't mean that Microsoft is the only one that should be doing their due diligence to kind of secure their endpoints and making sure that the infrastructure is nice and sound. I think that's also the responsibility of the client. The client has to do due diligence. If you get look, the reason we have so many buckets that are wide open and misconfigured, and the reason we have so many MongoDBs that are accessible nowadays, is because I think there's almost like this, we just spin it up and forget about it, and we can't. There's still some due diligence that has to be done. But I do think that a well-implemented cloud infrastructure does help to minimize some of the issues that are out there, but it doesn't mitigate all of them. And an attacker is still going to test everything. So a client will need to ensure that they have their proper procedures in place to validate the infrastructure. I was talking to a red team lead who told me that, hey, when he goes out there and tests out the infrastructure for his company, he doesn't care if it's a cloud infrastructure or on-prem. He's going and attacking all of it. And I think that's actually a reasonable approach. You need to go out there and check it out. You need to test for weaknesses, even if it's something that's managed by a third party. So I don't see the cloud as a silver bullet, but I see it as something that's definitely going to be helpful in minimizing some of the costs that have traditionally been there for some clients.
So in terms of your journey into security, I know over the course of the last couple of years, we've had a number of conversations onto some of the projects that you've worked on, including, I believe there was a Kali Linux instance on, it looked like a tablet of some kind. I can't recall if it was a phone or not.
It was a phone, yeah.
Phone.
Yeah, it was a phone.
But what were some of the resources that you used to explore all the different avenues? Because I remember having conversations with you about reading, the Web Application Hackers Handbook, or the browser, Hackers Handbook that they have out there as well, and some of the recommendations and conversations we had around that. So for our listeners, that I think there are a number of people that are on the development side that want to learn more about kind of the vast landscape that is security. Tell them maybe a little bit about like the journey that you took in terms of some of the resources you used.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So I'm getting that a lot now, and I publish a couple of blog posts about that, and I think that's piqued people's interest that want to join into the security community. The thing for me is that I think I did what a lot of people do. You download Kali, you install it, and then you sit there and wonder, all right, what do I do with this? Because it's a Linux distro, but unless you know how to actually work with the tools, it doesn't make a difference. The one thing I did know is that I wanted to understand how hackers compromise systems, even if it's something that's not massively advanced, or even if it's a technique that's dated. I wanted to understand it. I needed to get that feeling of compromising a system, even if it was a VM, just so I can see the steps and the thinking behind the process of that. I think anybody who wants to secure systems would do themselves justice by actually understanding how the systems are compromised. I think that's why a lot of times they say that really good blue teamers have that balance of the wanting to defend the systems and understanding all the intricacies, and they also understand how to penetrate the system. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. I really wanted to understand that, and then from there, what I did was I went through the usual things: installing Kali, reading books, going to conferences, downloading VMs, all these things, but nothing really clicked until I took my course with Matthew Hickey, who is the founder of Hacker House. And it was an on-prem course where I had hands-on training, and I was able to ask questions, and things really clicked at that point. That's where I was able to compromise some services and boxes, and then I'm like, oh, there's my aha moment, like, whoa, I get it now. And then from there, continuing on and reading more books, but then also jumping into like eLearn security and really diving deeper into their curriculum as to some of the more advanced things, whether it's scanning enumeration or whatever it might be, but really understanding more about how do you dig deeper into boxes, and how do you do things like pivoting and all that stuff. All that stuff has given me a really good understanding of the offensive side of things. And by proxy, what it's doing is also ensuring that I start thinking about how do I defend against those. But that's kind of the route I took. I wanted to understand a little bit more about the offensive side so I can determine which route I wanted to go in. Now I've actually started thinking a lot more about open source intelligence and digital forensics. That's kind of piqued my interest of late, especially the open source intelligence. The ability to find anything you want on the internet is a really powerful thing, and so that's kind of piqued my interest. And I have some good advocates and mentors that I can touch on there. And going on that statement, I think one of the things that you should absolutely do is build a good network of people that you can ask questions of. The one thing I have found is that the information security industry is the community itself is generally really good. They are there to help you grow as long as you're not there to waste their time. And building that network of people that you can kind of bounce ideas off of is something that helped me out tremendously. One of the things that I tried to avoid a lot was saying, hey, can you mentor me and teach me all the ropes? I wanted to try to avoid that as much as possible. And I did ask some people that, and they gave me some really good feedback, and I learned a lot. But I see too many people going in there and just saying, hey, teach me how to hack. I think this community wants you to, they want to point you in the right direction, and they want you to take the ball and actually start learning how to throw it. So that's what I would say. The books that I actually enjoyed a lot were the web applications. The web application, God, let me read it right there. Let me see, where is it? I always forget titles.
Hacker's Handbook.
The Hacker's Handbook, yes, web application Hacker's Handbook. And the book that I want to read now is actually Violent Python. It was recommended to me by a researcher, and I want to get deeper into Python and understanding how to build some more scripts around that. And I know that one of my good friends recommended Gray Hat Hacking, and I started perusing that book a little bit. It's actually really good. There's some nice advanced techniques in there that I was like kind of floored by. I was like, wow, this is really cool stuff. So that's another great book to look at. But ultimately, just know that the world of information security is massive. It's just huge. So you're going to have to take your time. I would say pick one thing for right now, just get going to give you at least some kind of momentum. And then as you're going through, then you can start picking up and looking at other aspects of security. But at least if you get the momentum, it'll get you deeper, help you build a network of people that can help you out, and also teach you how to use the tools that are available to you.
Awesome. And Paul, do you have any other questions before we get to our 5 questions for Application Security Weekly?
I do not.
All right. Ray, are you ready for Application Security Weekly's 5 questions?
Let's give it a shot.
All right. I was about to do Paul's Security Weekly 5 questions there for a second. What were the specs like on your first computer?
My first available computer was a Tandy 1000 TX, and you're talking it's an 8086 with 512K of memory. And I think it was a 10 megabyte hard card. So not even a hard drive. It was a hard drive, but a hard drive on a 7-bit ISA card. So it was crazy.
Wow, I guess. So then I've got to ask, what programming language did you learn first?
So the first programming language I learned, we can go to college, and that would have been BASIC. But in reality, the first professional language I used was something called DBase many, many, many moons ago. And it had a flat file structure, but it was actually really good back then. It would work great. It was all DOS based, so that's when I started programming. I programmed in DOS, and then from there I transitioned into something called Clipper, and Clipper would allow me to take those DBase applications and actually compile them into executable files.
Nice. So then I've got to ask, and it probably isn't as relevant for some of the things that you're programming in. So Vim or Emacs, or maybe in this case, Notepad?
That's rough. I don't think I'd even go for any of those. For me, it's Visual Studio Code.
There you go.
It is the best editor out. I will argue with anybody on that one. So I love Visual Studio Code.
I'm clearly on your side of the line with this. I will sit here and argue with anyone about VS Code because it's by far my favorite editor. So then when you're in VS Code, spaces or tabs?
Oh, God, that's a hard one. I'm going to go with spaces.
Cool. Yeah. You're safely in the same camp as I am here.
I'm going to go with spaces. It's like I'm trying to be cautious on that one because I don't want pitchforks going in here. People just go nuts over that. But yeah, I got to say spaces.
There you go. And
although you've given spaces for?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I do 4 spaces, but in the JavaScript community, 2 spaces.
Yeah. So I like 4 spaces. I don't know. I like my code very tidy.
I wonder
this
if
is like a really nerdy conversation. I'm just saying that, like, anyone else listening in to us talk about how many spaces we have in our code, it's really nerdy, and I love it.
Yeah,
I'd like to have a hypothesis here. Paul, how many spaces do you use in your code? 2 or 4?
If it's going to be spaces, it's going to be 4.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: is I have a hypothesis that people that wear glasses, 4 spaces.
Yep.
It's all about eyesight.
I wonder, we could really look at that. You should put out a tweet that asks that question.
A poll.
Yes, we have an informal poll. It just might happen after the show. I could see that happening. So the last question, and although you've given lots of this today, Ray, is there any additional advice that you would give to newcomers in the industry?
Sure. I think the big thing is to understand that nothing's going to be given to you for free. That's the bottom line. It took me 2 years to transition over, and the one common thing that I saw was there was a lot of people that were really nice and really happy to help you in learning, but in terms of getting an opportunity, you have to put in the work. There's just no way around it. You have to work really hard on your own, spend time reading the books, dedicate time to learning the techniques. A lot of people are really they're all about getting the OSCP. I see a lot of newcomers all talking about OSCP, and I think that's a great goal to set. But that shouldn't be your end goal. I think the end goal is understanding as much as possible while building a network of people that you can bounce ideas off. Because if you get a cert, that's great, but if you don't know anybody, it's really challenging to find an opportunity. build your network of people. Go out there, and I like to use this phrase, and it was a phrase that was given to me by the first person who hired me at Microsoft, Scott Hanselman. I like to go out there and shake hands and kiss babies. That's what I like to do. And what I mean by that is I go out there and I try to talk to as many people as possible in the community and get to know them and understand what they're doing. And hopefully those people become friends, and I can learn from them. And the more people that you know, the more resources you have at your disposal, whether it's a new tool that comes down that's coming out and they want to share it with you, or it's a new idea that you can collaborate with them on, or maybe it's a new job opportunity that they're like, hey, you'd be ideal for that. But I think building the relationships is really critical. And the other thing that I am going to throw in is, Keith, I'm going to use something that you taught me. One of the things that helped me out when I was learning was blocking off my day in time segments. And you're really good at this, Keith. And I would follow your tweets and I'd see how you'd block off your time. And I started mimicking that and saying, I'm going to dedicate an hour for reading, and I'm going to dedicate 2 hours for practice, and I'm going to dedicate 8 hours for work. And then after that, I'm going to have another hour for review or whatever it might be, and family time. And I know it sounds like to some people might be like, well, that's very regimented. But the thing in this space where things are moving so fast, you have to be somewhat regimented in that sense in order to have a sense of sanity and a sense of schedule and a sense of commitment to what you're doing. If you know that for the next 2 hours you're going to be practicing, I don't know, hacking, at least you know you've dedicated that time. And if you don't do it, that's on you. That's time that you've just lost. So by blocking off segments of time, that helped me tremendously in organizing my learning process. So I appreciate you doing that, Keith, and putting it out in the community.
Thank you. And you're very welcome. In fact, I got to get back to doing that because I haven't been doing it very long. But the thing that I use, just for everyone that wants to know for that trick before we break here, is a productivity planner. So go out, look for one on Amazon. That is the key to my success on that front as well. And all the quotes that I've used are all taken from that. So, or at least most of them are. With that, we are going to take a short break though, and then come back for the news. Rey Bango, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.